So good morning, everyone. It's day 2. So welcome again. We want to start with the greetings by Professor Sara Portasoni, who is full professor of landscape architecture and the head of the PhD program in architecture, urban and interior design.
So thank you for being here. It's really a pleasure for me to host you. And first of all, of course, I want to thank Niccolò Chirichetti and Federica Cavallaro, who did a very, very interesting initiative for our PhD program. The fact that the candidates are already imagining, designing, and also organizing this kind of initiative is very relevant in the program of their education as researcher, but also is very relevant because these are opportunities for establishing important networks, often based also on their experience in different universities. So I really thank all the keynote speakers that accepted to be here. And yesterday, unfortunately, I had a problem and I couldn't join you. So today I'm here and I'm really looking forward for listening and learning. And thank you again.
So thank you. So we can start with the keynote lecture by Mats Birgens, who is an architect from Studio Cobe from Denmark. He accumulated quite a unique experience in strategic planning and urban design for his work. For example, leading competitions like the Nordhaven, Nordport Station, the North Campus in Copenhagen, taking a responsibility as a project director. Now he is the head of our urbanism department at Studio Cobe, and is responsible for driving the professional development of the urban and strategic planning of the studio. He has a visionary and future-oriented focus, and in addition, he follows on a daily basis quite a number of projects, and he works in a cross-disciplinary team of about 70 people. So we welcome Mads, and his lecture, it's going to be Time in the City, How Mobility Shapes Society. So the floor is yours.
Good. So thank you very much for the floor, for the invitation to come here today. We're very honored always to come out and discuss our projects. And these days, with all the challenges and crises we experience, it's more relevant than ever to share experience across countries, universities, and practice, and etc. I will talk about some of our key projects regarding mobility, urban landscapes, and also touch upon some of the important discussions that were brought up yesterday from Gilles. Our conversation continued maybe a bit too late also yesterday, but I think there's a lot of relevance in discussing this modernity, the modernism that's still sort of thriving in many ways, and how we can challenge that and maybe take that project and make it more work it towards a better ecology and so on. So at the core of all of this, the urban environments, I think it's so important to discuss how infrastructure, mobility shapes our lives, shapes our society, and also how important it is when we invest in mobility solutions, we invest in infrastructure, it's really part of shaping our daily lives. So it's sort of looking back at the core of all of this. Why did we start building all these cities some 1,000 years ago when we started building cities? At the core of all of these discussions lies the very important promise of creating good lives for the people living in the cities. And I think we should remember that in our work and looking at that. I mean, the way actually they started structuring the city was around the experience of time, how much time it took to come from home to work, from home to school, etc. And that became the base of starting the discussion of building infrastructure, building mobility within our societies. And then there was 100 years ago a major disruption within this, talking about the Holy Highway. the highway to anywhere, where suddenly it was not a problem about distance anymore, because we invented the car, we invented the highway, so we could suddenly live far away from the center where we might be working or going to school or university. And this sort of created a massive sprawl. As we all know, the city started growing intensely across the landscapes, and somehow we have continued that tradition and are still doing so. And I think that's a major problem in terms of thinking a more sustainable world. We really need to start rethinking that way of looking at infrastructure. And that sort of modernist project and the whole lifestyle around modernity, I think, is at the core of this question. So linking infrastructure with time, I think there's so many different topics around this, which is also what I wrote about in the abstract for your book of abstracts, but also what came out in our latest Cobe newspaper, where we discuss time in all the frames of it, from architecture, but also the layers of time within our cities, that maybe the cities actually represent the sort of biggest densification of time, the experience of time and historical time on all matters. And I think that's an interesting sort of perspective to discuss and work with. Should I just take this here? Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff to discuss around this, and I brought a few newspapers. There's one left for anybody interested after the lecture. So looking at time, this is a drone video hovering over the North Harbor, the main street of the North Harbor. We have this sort of the luck today of living in this area with our office, and being able to look into all the different projects we've done, from infrastructure to landscapes to build the built environment. And I think there's really this time right now where we have to look backwards into all the ways we are doing things and structuring things, and from that become smarter in terms of how we think and plan for the future of our cities. Because we plan for this urban life, and urban life takes its pace in many different heights, levels, on many different methods of mobility. And I think if we spread out all the mobility forms we have today, from walking to micromobility, it's interesting to look at the speeds we travel on. And if you make it this sort of rainbow of mobility, these sort of street sections that we need to work with today are sort of changing the city's urban spaces into becoming enormous dimensions, because we need room for all of these different mobility methods. So something that we look into is how we can start sharing more space, and how we can also maybe refocus on within our inner cities, and really down prioritize car usage, especially. We do that in many new districts in Copenhagen. But also change the speed. So actually, the high speed sort of methods of moving around the city should be the collective transport of trains and metros and so on. It should not be the car that's your primary way to move around. If you want to move short distances, you should do it by bike or by walking or other micromobility. So there's a lot of thinking in this, I think, that we could learn from, and maybe we did these weird collages on rainbows of mobility, where we actually start looking smarter into all these smart mobility forms, and start rethinking the usage of all the infrastructure we have already built. And that is also to really tackle the problem of not invading more natural landscapes than we have already done. But when we talk about urban life in relation to natural life, we actually need more time within the nature. We need to slow down more. We need to have more time for thought. And we see, at least right now, a tendency to change a lot of gray landscapes into a combination into urban nature. This is a big project I'll get back to outside Copenhagen, which looked like this back in 2010 when I did the site visit with my colleague EU here. And today, the exact same picture looks like this, and is a complete combination of climate solutions, playgrounds, as well as urban densification. I'll get back to this later. I'll just shortly tell a bit about our office. I don't know how many has been to Copenhagen within the past 5 years or something. Okay, not that many. That's good. Then there's something to tell about. But you should really come and visit. I think it's an interesting case of a city that completely changed over the past 20 years. But I'll get back to that. We just shortly, we started back in 2006. We actually have our 20 years anniversary next year. This is also when I started, and today we have grown into becoming a quite big office. We're 170 people, more or less. We're a complete mix of architects and planners and landscape architects, also, of course, constructing architects and interior designers. So we've become quite a big community of designers, thinkers, architects. And we do a lot of dialogue. We love to go out and share and discuss our projects like here, but also internally we host a lot of different discussions and events, academia, meeting practice, and so on, in order to really broaden our own knowledge, but also other different framing other cities and so on. We also think it's very important to invite artists and so on who can speak on behalf of other species, and that whole discussion on how to engage with the more natural life within and around our cities. Yeah, this is just showing all the projects we've done over the past soon 20 years. It's showing the sort of scale of size, the biggest one being the North Harbor, but also the actually complete mix of urban landscape and architecture within our projects, and the complete different sizes and scales of it. And I think that's at the core of what we do. If we bring all of this together, what we think is the most important around our philosophy and thinking is to be super contextual in whatever we do and wherever we work. We also have a big focus on doing research and collaborations. So we have a lot of research around our projects. Our founder, Dan Stuttgart, became a professor at Harvard, and then we also have in-house PhDs doing research on sustainable futures and urban repair and other things. And I think it's we've just been part of some workshops discussing the future of Copenhagen and this sort of level of threats in many different ways, especially with the whole situation around climate and so on, and how relevant it is to look at how we, of course, find the curve where we go up and become a more resilient society rather than actually the complete climate collapse and so on, and many other discussions within this. And I think we framed these 6 different main strategies and challenges we work with, whereas today, of course, I'll talk a lot about connectivity and mobility. But I think these 6 challenges we meet within any urban project we do. We also meet it within any sort of urban space we do. And these projects are really working within an umbrella that we call adaptive cities, that we sort of frame in our research around the office. At the core of this, we see we use Copenhagen and we learn from Copenhagen. And we talk a lot about how the city transformed, especially around mobility, the core of it being the bike culture of Copenhagen that became a core new narrative, but also how the city changed the landscape of the city. The harbor of Copenhagen is completely swimmable now and has become an enormous new recreational sort of quality for all the inhabitants of the city. So the city, I think this image is one of my favorite images showing how this guy, he took his own like sofa and living room, put it on a platform, and sailed around the Copenhagen harbors, picking up friends. At the core of this sort of livability lies the lifestyle, where we have a completely outfolded possibility of using the urban space and using the urban landscape in so many different ways. In the back, you have the first public harbor bath built in Copenhagen in 2004. That has been multiplied. Today, there's over 30 harbor baths within the urban blue landscape of Copenhagen, creating this sort of enormous playful landscape for the whole city and guests to activate around. So I'll just give a brief introduction to Copenhagen because I think it's very important to also discuss the situation on demographic levels and so on. And you can see the forecast of Copenhagen is still growth in the future. And that has been the situation for the past 30 years and also is the sort of baseline of how Copenhagen growth is keeping on thriving in many ways. But there's a lot of discussion on how you grow and what you built for, also creating an affordable city where there's room for all kinds of housing and so on. And I think to understand this, you need to look back in history into a very important framework. I don't know if you heard about the finger plan of Copenhagen. I think that's a historical framework for understanding why we can do what we do today in the city, but also the sort of boldness and braveness of doing a regional master plan that becomes a political instrument to steer the growth of a city. And within this lies the idea of basically having the center of Copenhagen connected to a S-Bahn system, train system. So all of these fingers are planned since the 50s around mobility at the core. So transit-oriented development. And that is part of, I think, an interesting story of growth. Looking back in Copenhagen just before the Second World War, actually there was more people living within the municipality of Copenhagen than we have today still. And that people live very differently, very compact and not in very healthy housing and so on. And then you can see what happened around modernity thriving here in the 50s, where everybody fled the city into this new finger plan, and the whole suburban sprawl with the modernity started thriving around Copenhagen. The good thing about this is that all of these suburbs are connected to this train network of the finger plan. So it's actually still well connected in terms of connectivity and transportation. We see now towards being maybe 700,000 people around 2030 is the growth prospects. So still, we are not even close to being the same amount of people as before the war. And there is a lot of different stories in this. One of them is, Copenhagen used to be known for the Little Mermaid for many years. It was a kind of the urban icon of a city, but very small urban icon. Also a bit silly back then. It was stolen several times, and it was like, yeah. And that narrative has completely changed in many ways, because now people come to Copenhagen to try the bike system, to be part of this new livable Copenhagen, where it's more about the lifestyle of the city that you visit more than seeing the Little Mermaid. And that is a sort of movement that's become a folkloric movement, and that everybody just loves to be part of. And it's becoming a cultural movement of that everybody is proud of in the city. It's also a very healthy way of moving. It's low cost, low carbon in any way. So it's driving a very interesting I think, future on mobility. But I think it's important to see that actually bicycling went completely down towards the 80s, especially after modernity and the car. But then in the oil crisis back in the 80s, there was a renewed investment in bike infrastructure and the reinvention of the bike culture of Copenhagen. So it's also some very long strategic projects that's been done within the city that makes the sort of bike culture today thrive really well. And these investments are keeping on going. There's like a crazy beautiful bike bridges being built around the city, connecting across the harborscapes. There's a lot of investments in different bike cultural sort of new street sections and so on to really play around this culture. And that makes it so efficient to bike in Copenhagen that people bike in whatever the weather circumstances. And that is due to the fact that it takes like 10-15 minutes to go from A to B on a bike. But if you take a car, it might take half an hour or an hour. So, and it's also, we got a good, safe infrastructure for bikes. So there's also a safety level around this urban design. So that means today almost half of Copenhageners bike to and from work or school, which is an insanely high number compared to many cities. And together with walking and public transport, it's 3/4 of the city actually moving around this. So that's a major reduction on cars, as you can see. There's today the conflict of the car users feeling neglected in the cityscape and so on. So actually that's become a political sort of instability, but that's another discussion. I'll just shortly tell about one of the projects actually I was myself involved in back in 2007 when we did this project for the new Nørreport station. This is the busiest station in Denmark with around 250,000 people passing through every day. And the idea for this was basically to track all the pedestrians, all the users of this core of Copenhagen, which is the central sort of mobility hub between trains and buses and metro system and bikes and so on. So we sort of tracked all the people's people flows. And within this flow drawing, we designed these islands where we could then place the necessity for bike parking, but also the necessity for stations and so on. So that sort of simple gesture and tracking, this is a metaphor picture taken from tracing people's footsteps around the area, sort of framed these islands we could then develop and program with all the bike parking. And then the whole exercise around designing new bike parking became this project about just lowering all the bikes 30 centimeters. You know, one of the main problems with bike parking is that they keep on like stacking up and they become chaotic. So just by lowering these 30 centimeters actually, and we did a lot of design exercises on how to maximize and do super compact bike parking, we managed to sort of solve this sort of chaotic situation, because if you put your bike here on a slope, it was basically tilt. So people actually don't do that. So they stick to these islands. It's a very simple gesture, very simple design, landscape design, that actually keeps these enormous pools of bikes within these designated areas. It's also creating an interesting sort of flow space that people love to sort of bike around, skate around, and so on. And it's also become a social hub within the city where people obviously like stations should be nice, open-minded social places where you can hang out and take part in the urban space at day and night. So in many ways, even though this place is quickly worn down, if you visit Nørreport today, it looks pretty used, even though it's only 10 years old. So there's a lot of, you also really need to take care of these spaces and keep up the quality of them. So this was our big bike project number one. And then we got the chance to participate in this competition for this plaza at the University of Copenhagen, where we then took our bike concept one step further from the sort of bike beds into the bike caves. This is how it looked before we did the project. Quite typical way of having ordinary bike parking stacked up in a gray landscape of old concrete tiles and so on. So we reorganized the whole plaza into this dynamic landscape where we put all the bikes underneath these hills and reframed the sort of Nørreport design, which is also part of it, open bike beds. But then we put a lid on some of them and created this, we call it the innovation or learning landscape of Copenhagen. which is then becoming also places to sit and hang out and move. And then underneath, we have these bike caves for bike storage, sort of covered underneath. They're also being used for multiple other things, events and so on the plaza. There are these beautiful sculptures and spaces within the campus to use for many different social purposes and also learning situations. There's a sort of amphi scenes here on the sides, so you can also do outdoor education or have a speech or a talk. And then it's completely merging with the green landscape of the nearby big nature park of Amager. And like that, it's merging completely. Over here, it's also merging different functions. You have student housings together with the faculties and so on. So it's sort of driven this moon-like landscape, I think this, to drive around. It's really fun as a bikeable plaza. Is sort of a playground for bikes and people to hang around within, and highly functional also. And again, the importance of when we do these big investments, that it also has a social impact. It creates a meeting place. It creates a sort of a functionality, dual functionality, and a hybrid, taking care of several things at the same time. And all these caves can sort of cover great other sort of meeting points and social landscapes for people or young people to meet around both bike culture and learnings at the same time. So from this, I'll take you to the North Harbor, this enormous project, and talk a bit about the 5-minute city concept. You probably know the 15-minute city from Carlos Moreno, from Paris, which is sort of the same idea. It was also actually developed around the same time in 2010, 10-ish. But the North Harbor is a really long-term plan. It's a 50-year planning perspective. It's a huge plan that's gonna inhabit 40,000 people in the future and 40,000 workplaces. It's part of the growing Copenhagen, and it's part of what we call the eastern harbor of the city. There's actually a huge island being planned here as part of the future resiliency plan. So we're gonna sort of make sure that the inner harbor of Copenhagen is not gonna flood the city within a storm or something. But that's another story. But I think one very important part of this is how, talking about bike culture, and how the investment in a new metro system in Copenhagen has become part of a land speculation case, actually. Because all the land being sold out here in the North Harbor and other places is actually being transferred to the metro company. So all the land speculation here is actually what finances the public transportation system of the city. So very important political decision here was to connect the North Harbor development already from the very beginning. So it was already connected to the new metro ring of Copenhagen. Copenhagen's metro is quite young compared to, for instance, Milan and so on. But it's really completely changing the dynamic of the city, that everybody can get around within a very efficient, highly efficient metro system. Then important is also that this system is linked to the bike culture, and that was one of the main concepts for our North Harbor project, was to create a green loop, which is basically connecting the whole development from the early phases in here. This is how far we've come today, to the future development, which is a combination of a Highline metro system and a green bike path, a super bike path. So it's sort of a super efficient spine connecting the whole area today and in the future, along a green loop, a green plantation, and a sort of linear park. This is also a very important instrument politically, because this is also, it's part of a flexible framework of the planning. We have revised this long-term structure plan 4 times now already. It sort of changes also the loop into being a At one point, it was more like a question mark. But then today, it's actually going to be a sort of an end in the plan because there's no reason to do the full loop. A lot of discussions around that. But the bike path will still be the big green loop connecting the whole area. And this whole phasing strategy has really been the core of how to develop a solid and robust framework of such a long planning. You need to develop it bit by bit. So the whole planning instrument is really working from building out one neighborhood at the time, one cluster at the time. And like that, each neighborhood can frame its own identity, frame its own development, its own architects, and become a huge and sort of gain in diversity over time. Together with that main concept of the islands, there's 6 other strategies. I'll just run through this sort of concept of the 5-minute city as one of them, talking about connectivity. And that is this sort of hybrid mobility spine connecting a highly efficient bike culture together with this new metro system. So that delivers in terms of creating this proximity. You can see these small circles here showing a 5-minute radius walking from each of these stops on the metro line. And how we've designed the whole city around that, putting all the cars inside big parking hubs like this. It's not just a parking hub, it's also a playground on the roof. And a big sort of a fitness playground as well. You can see the first metro station we designed, which is right next to our office over there. So in general, there's plenty of spaces for cars on the North Harbor. There's 1 car per 200 square meter built environment. But they are not favorized in the planning. They are not like planned to be efficient. So taking a car will always be take more time than taking a bike or using your feet to walk. Today we have the first 5-minute city realized. There's around 5,000 people living here in the area today. It's a complete mix. It's 60% housing, 40% office. And it's really a good case if you want to explore a sort of a 5-minute case or a sort of the discussion on proximity within our neighborhood using public transportation as nodes to build sustainable frameworks around. I think it has a lot of good discussions here. There's obviously always challenges within these projects. But that's what we see, and I did a few diagrams here showing how these metro stations then I think what's, again, coming back to the bike culture versus walking culture, a 5-minute walking doesn't actually cover the whole area, but together with the efficient bike planning, we cover the whole area of the first phases with these just 2 metro stops. So it's this combination of mobility, micromobility, favorizing bikes and walking, is creating a highly efficient people in terms of creating proximity and easily walkable areas. Then there's also parking silos on the area. There's these 4 parking silos built already, which is, you could say, also a 5-minute city concept. So 5 minutes from walking, you can always, it covers almost the whole area with the parking facilities. So this is a collage we did for the Green Loop back in 2009 or something. And I think that's, at least for me as an urbanist and landscape designer, I think this is really interesting to see how that suddenly develops and actually takes its shape from the visions you did many years ago to becoming reality and looking at how it works and so on. We just finalized a big playground underneath the metro line. So it's, again, this double programming, really double using all the investments we put in the city. So also in terms of this, studying mobility, I could really recommend going and looking at this, and in general looking back at how we started 2009, keeping a lot of the historical urban mass of the area and densified around that has become a major success. Also, when we talk about mobility, if you want to create a lively district, and you actually facilitate walking and biking, you also get a lot of young people to the area, especially when you create a nice destination, an urban beach within the area. And there was a lot of these discussions back when we did. Oh yeah, there's a lot of you can really experience the car-free areas also, and how the landscape is really purpose for walking and biking because of these mobility hubs. But it's good to look back at when we did these visuals back in 2009, the politicians really didn't believe us that we could actually create all of this urban life that we're just doing in these fancy collages. But we completely proved them wrong. There's actually almost too many people on these waterfronts today, creating another sort of challenge for the area to thrive. But anyways, it's this sort of planning instruments for soft mobility together with placemaking. I think it's a fantastic way of actually creating livable new districts and neighborhoods within our cities. Here you see actually reach the front cover of Monocle. It's been Copenhagen has been thriving really well on these global quality of life surveys, and that is also due to some of these investments in regeneration projects around the city. So I'll just take you to another project. It's another district in Copenhagen, which we are doing the local planning for right now. And that is completely different because it's in the center of the city. It's an old railway, so brownfield district again. But again, we are trying to take our ideas on creating car-free districts and bike culture to a new level again. And that is very much, this is the site today. Full of train tracks, a beautiful area, full of beautiful old factory buildings and so on. And the good story here is also that all the existing buildings are being kept and transformed within the project. So it's a complete transformation of landscape and the built environment within the site. So this is the vision of creating a super green district. And what we really work on here to look into is how to create green streets. And anybody doing street design know how difficult it actually is to do proper green streets because of all the infrastructure underground. So it's a sort of the fight for space within our cities is immense, both underground and overground. So we've done tons of exercises here in terms of how to create really green streets. And it's all about prioritizing where to put the wires underground and where to actually create a lot of soil for green streets to thrive. I have some sections in a bit. We call it infra-nature. Gilles, that's a good sort of maybe a discussion. Anyways, and so we discussed this, how to create green streets and how to frame a different section where there's a space for the roots underground. And so the engineers with their cables and their massive pipes don't take up all the land underground. I'll just jump through some of these. Oh, I thought I had some sections in here. Yeah, here they are. So, no. Well, you can see it a bit here. But so it's all about priorities. In some streets, you have a lot of room for garbage transportation, for fire trucks, etc. But in other spaces, you leave space for greenery. It's actually the wrong sections, but anyways. So this is another story, a study we did here in terms of also designing streets for walking and biking, how to prioritize streets and how to study the sort of safety distance around vehicles. And what we found again is that the estimation, if you talk to a traffic engineer on how many bikes and cars you can fit within a street, if you lower the level of the speed of the cars, the safety distance around the car becomes way smaller, and you can actually add volume of people moving around these streets. So if you go down to 15 kilometers an hour, you will have these super slow green streets and urban environments that prioritize walking and biking and actually using the streets as public space rather than infrastructure. And I think there's so much learning in this, how to redesign our infrastructure within our neighborhoods. We might need big, efficient infrastructure connecting cities and so on. But within our cities, we can really transform neighborhoods into becoming primarily for hanging out and creating livable districts for the people in the city. So that is really what we emphasize here. We start the development hopefully in a year or two. Right now, we're finalizing the local planning of the area. It's a major plan for 500,000 square meters, so an enormous local plan work. It's the biggest local plan in Danish history, I think. Another project is also how to keep all these existing buildings on the site. We did a transformation strategy on every single building on the site and showed an idea catalog of how in the early phases it could be temporarily used and how in the late phases it could be transformed to different purposes within the programming of the area. Yeah, so some visuals of how the transformation of one of these old factories will become maybe a brewery in combination with a big new school in Copenhagen in the heart of the district, but also how maybe some of these structures could actually just serve as temporary urban spaces, covered urban spaces to create different places for activity within the site. And in general, we hope we can create the greenest district with the most amount of greenery and trees per square meter in Copenhagen. That's at least our vision. And we're trying to get the politicians to sort of sign that as a vision for the future of the railway district. Now, finally, I'll just zoom out a bit. How am I doing time-wise? Good? That's good. Zoom out a bit. Because what happens when we look into Copenhagen in different scales, I at least as an urbanist think is super interesting when we talk about mobility, because we have this luxury ring in here where we have really planned for bike culture. We have the metro system now. Everything is working super nice. It's the tourist brochure of Copenhagen. But once we go out into the more suburban landscape of Copenhagen, the landscape completely changes and the challenges changes with that. And that is obviously due to the fact that everything out here, in this ring out here, is connected with cars. So, and as we all know, this sort of car-centric culture we live within is also a big part of the greenhouse gas emissions. So there's a lot of work to do here and a lot of projects to actually enhance the transition from cars to collectivity. And this is one project we did, which is on one of the main arteries entering Copenhagen from the south. We did this major transportation hub. It also serves as a bridge between two growing neighborhoods in southern Copenhagen called Cobe. So it works both as a connector and also as a transition from road. There's a huge car parking here. So you can go to this point and then you can get directly to Copenhagen in 15 minutes. So it serves as this transition tool also culturally. But then when you do these investments, they're enormous investments in high-speed rail and so on. The importance also in actually creating nice urban spaces within these stations. So it's both a sort of transportation corridor, a bridge and a station and a space to hang out. It's also become a landmark for the community, looking into to having more sustainable transportation, linking the community with Copenhagen. So one project that, I mean, in the future, we would hope that actually it's not just for people deciding to stop, but if you actually made a paywall underneath this bridge, you could actually force way more traffic into taking the train to and from Copenhagen. So this is one project moving out in the circles. And then I would just, this historical development that we did the master plan for in 2010 or something, which is finally getting realized, is basically one of those famous suburbs planned in the 70s, 80s outside Copenhagen. It's framed around enormous modernist visions on the future, how Copenhagen would grow and how this would be a new enormous city center just outside the existing city center. But these plans, you know, they never really get realized. They built all the infrastructure, but building new cities is so insanely difficult in terms of creating nice urban culture and nice districts. This is within the finger plan. It's located right here. And it's really been suffering for 40 years since it was developed. They started, of course, by building a big mall. It's one of the first urban malls in Denmark, which sort of sucked all urban life into this box. So nobody needed to use the streets around it. And then they served it with massive American model car parkings. And then they did a super monofunctional planning with a big office area right next to it. They did everything wrong besides one thing. They actually planned a really nice, huge regional train station connecting Copenhagen in 20 minutes. As you can see, it's super POMO in terms of its design. It's one of those love-hate objects in Copenhagen architecturally. But it's super efficient because it connects the area with the city. And there's a lot of political discussions around Høje-Taastrup, how it's never really succeeded. And now they're trying again to build a city. But now we see the framework actually shaping, and our master plan from 2009 is showing its works. Basically, our idea was to take all these monofunctional areas, densify and go from boulevards to a new development of housing, and then connecting the train station with the shopping center with a new urban park, creating this new hinge and this new major quality of the area. So it's a complete densification around the mall, which was actually really suffering a lot in terms of having visitors, which is now changing. But it's also densifying an old office district with new housing. So it's creating this the mixed use, and again another 5-minute city within Copenhagen area. One of the big how to finance these enormous landscape projects is also always a super tricky part. For this one, we actually managed to take all the infrastructure that's usually put underground, all the pipes, the whole engineering works of what resembles 20 million Danish crowns. So instead of building pipes, we took all of the investments on that and put it into making a big playful river to handle the water, surface water in the future. So from these sort of investments in pipes to becoming investments in a park area, that became the core attraction and the main design driver for the area. So we made this enormous skate park, or not only skate, street sport park at the heart of the area, connecting different areas. And we worked together with this Rune, who's a world famous skater. And we did this combination of park and street sports within the area, and created activities and places also to rest, obviously, within the area, connecting the area to the other connected areas. So we made a skate park, which is obviously for all levels, and together with the Rune and his partner, Glifberg. Don't know if you're into skate culture, but he's a famous figure in some of these skate games. He's even become an animated figure. And they did this skate park designer company together. So they helped doing these skate parks all around Denmark and also outside the country today. And it was extremely fun to work with them. But I think on the design part, how Rune Glifberg, he's drawing his own weird design or skate tags and making different edges to skate and so on. But what was even more important, I think, was actually that sort of branding potential around Rune and his global skate community, because he's such a famous skater. He actually managed to create Copenhagen Open in Høje-Taastrup. In this enormous skate park, he sort of attracted skaters from all over the world to come and join the opening of the park. So I think now there's more global skaters knowing Høje-Taastrup than Copenhageners in some way. What we still lack is sort of how to nail the everyday life and the liveliness around the park. It's slowly growing. And they built a new town hall in the middle of the park here, so the mayor can sit and watch his urban life slowly growing. He's very happy about the development, and he's even learning to skate, he said. So there's a lot of stories and good sort of vibrations around doing playful landscapes as part of these urban developments. And one thing is the skate part, but it's also strengthening the network of biking and walking, connecting areas all around this new central area throughout these green different landscapes. So it's really enhancing a much bigger area than the project itself. Yeah, and then there is this funny story. Actually, we were invited to rethink the mall here because they could suddenly see the benefits of being part of an urban development and a new park. So since the park opening, the guests, the visitation within the mall actually completely changed. And I think even though I'm not a big fan of mall culture, but there's a lot of these huge modernist malls around the landscapes of Europe. A lot of them is neglected. A lot of them is not making money. So how we can transform either the malls or the areas around them into new urban districts, there's actually an enormous like CO2 portion to save from tearing it down or whatever else would happen. So I think there's a good stories here in Høje-Taastrup on several levels. Yeah, this is how it looks today. And then I'm more or less at the end, but I'll just zoom out on a research project we're doing, which is part of looking into the Finger Plan 2.0. What is the future of Copenhagen, and how will Copenhagen sort of be driven around this whole climate agenda, but also the relation between Copenhagen and Sweden, which is right, southern Sweden is right next to. We did a finger plan with 6 fingers, where we take the relation to Sweden way more serious and try to frame a new storyline, which is not about the modernist and the modernity, but it's actually about the natural impact we've had for so long to put that upside down. And instead of drawing infrastructure for cars and trains and so on, we did a big infrastructural project for nature. So how for the nature to correlate. We did an enormous sort of research on the whole landscape in the whole metropolitan area to see how a natural water flow would be connected around the area and create this framework for a blue metropolis around the Finger Plan. We did some weird collages on how to let the water rule, how to follow the water streams of the existing area to create more a sort of a vision on some climate islands for different usage, energy parks as well. And I think a very important point here is, again, if we look at this old infrastructural network that's already been built, is already there, we actually connect not just Copenhagen and Malmö, but we connect a number of cities. We connect 3 million people within this network. But the network is not super efficient. There's not a shared traveler solution between Copenhagen and Denmark and Sweden. At least it's not super efficient and it's expensive. But if we invested in connecting these areas a bit better in the rail network, created better stations around the area, we could emphasize a sustainable development in a regional scale, which could, I mean, be a completely different way of looking into not building more new cities, but actually using what we've already built. There's thousands of housing areas within the whole network of the area. So if we created a better connectivity, we could also frame a more sustainable future around reusing existing housing masses. Together with that, also using the network of the existing train network to create better destinations within the landscape and create a much better and richer recreational network also for people to use the landscape qualities, which of the area. We did some more of these funny collages and really look into scalable solutions across from urban space and sort of product design towards urban solutions in a large scale. So what we hope with this is to frame a sort of political vision, which could create this sixth finger connecting Copenhagen and Malmö, but more point towards a future where we might not have to plan for more city, but actually it's more about connecting existing cities. So next to that is looking at, when we start looking at very political map here, job markets, there's a new mega connection between southern Denmark and Germany, which in the future with this Femern Belt tunnel will connect Denmark and Germany, or Copenhagen and Hamburg much more efficiently. And it will actually completely change the dynamics of the region. And hopefully it will also change this enormous urban corridor going from the Nordics all the way to Milan, to Rome, and maybe together with, I don't know if you've heard about it, but there's an enormous tunnel project, the Brenner Tunnel. Also, when that is finalized, actually we'll have an extremely efficient corridor for trains going through Europe and connecting all of these urban points in completely new ways. So I think there's a lot of this connectivity thinking and investments in better stations, better station areas that could be extremely interesting to create maybe a network around. And I don't know if you know this 10T networks, I call it the master plan of Europe. It's the EU that made this framework, which I really think is interesting to look into. Because within this network, there are these super important investments. And I think, I don't remember when the Brenner Tunnel is done, but the tunnel between Copenhagen and Hamburg is done in 4 years. And all of these investments in connecting the cities we already built are going to create a more dynamic and hopefully a more healthier and well-connected Europe in the future. So I think there's a lot of interesting mobility aspects in this, and how economies completely are triggered by these infrastructural investments. So we don't have to grow our cities more, but actually connect them more efficiently. And I think that's looking into a future of maybe looking into a broader collectivity. One thing is this is a collage from our Blue Metropolis, linking species and listening better to both nature and different voices of energy planning and many other things. But I think we need to look at a more collective continent within Europe, also looking at the really big scale, where we coordinate more and maybe use the project of the European Union more efficiently. So that was my words. Thank you so much for listening.
So, thank you, Mats, for the lecture. We have some time for questions. I start with one we got online. So, for the bike cave, was there any precautions discussed for controlling antisocial elements for encroaching the shelter spaces?
Oh, sorry, I was drinking. What was the question?
For the bike cave, if there was any precautions discussed for controlling antisocial elements for encroaching the shelter spaces?
Yeah, there's, of course, these shelters can also be a bit dodgy at night. There's a lot of light design around the caves, and the dimensions are pretty big. So it doesn't feel like a basement or anything. And the holes, there's cut enormous holes around it. You should really, again, go and explore it. It's a fascinating new way of thinking bike parking together with urban space, I think.
Thanks. Any other questions?
First of all, thank you for the inspiring lecture and all the suggestions that came out from the projects that you've shown. I had one question about, like, especially the Northaven, sorry for the pronunciation, master plan. So all the northern development, and especially like in those images, I've seen a lot of continuity, also in the interaction between architecture and the public space. And so I want to know if there were some kind of guidelines also for the architectural development and projects that have been then later on developed in that area, or if it was like...
There's been a lot of guidelines. Okay. It's probably... I think if you talk about urban design, there's an enormous investment in creating guidelines for the local plan. So for the first, there's 7 different phases in the first area here. But every islet in the plan, every island in the black and white plan I showed, has its own design guide in terms of both color tones, but also in terms of heights, dimensioning, and all these things. So that's been pretty strict, and there's been a big investment in this urban design phase for that. So there's also a lot of principles of edge zones, and like the urban design guidelines are actually, there's some that are law, of course, but there's also a lot of sort of just inspirational catalog on different like the edge zones around buildings and so on, landscape. But I think regarding the landscape, I think there's the landowner learned a lot from this project, because we've been a team of 3 different offices together creating a co-project around the landscape. So we actually together, we designed the whole first landscape project, streets, parks, waterfronts, everything, more or less, besides some few pockets around. So it's created a very coherent landscape, and you can really feel that when you walk around, that everything is connected, and it's been the same team sitting there now for 15 years also. At least not all of them, but the core of it. It's been the same project director on it. So there's been an enormous strong focus on the core team together with the landowner, creating all the guidelines for landscape and urban design. And you can really see that today. That sort of coherent work and process is really, I think, talking about urban process, a process design that we at least learn a lot from. But it's also hard to copy to any other context, but there's a lot of around the organization also, and so on.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you for the really wonderful presentation. It's incredibly exciting to see all these initiatives being realized, from walkability and bikeability, 5-minute cities, let alone 15-minute cities that so many cities strive for. And I wonder if, I was wondering if you could speak to the sort of biggest hindrances to having this work realized. I'm coming from Berlin, which is a city that often is missing financial means, that also sometimes has democratic processes and initiatives that block densification in the city, and culturally many people don't want it. And I think maybe in a more socially cohesive society in Copenhagen, I wonder how that also translates, or if those are also similar hindrances, or beyond that, what the other ones are in this work that you have been able to realize.
Yeah, there's tons of challenges in this also, that there's a lot of discussions around this right now, because Copenhagen keeps on figuring like #1 in all these livability indexes. So there's a lot of research on the process behind the urban development. And I think what we can see compares, we do tons of different projects in Copenhagen in many scales. We can just see one-to-one where it really goes wrong is where there's too many landowners, too many conflicts, and no partnership. The sort of partnership is the most important part to realize well-connected, livable areas. We do tons of plans that never happen, because either there's, as I would say, also sometimes you cannot do a proper master plan if there's 10 different landowners involved. So what we see, for instance, the Høje project is a good case actually there was 5 different landowners in the project, and also the interest around it. They did a shared company together. So they put all their land into this, and they did a co-program development and shared the sort of surplus of it. And the city was also a stakeholder in that. That is probably, from being a very difficult case with the multiple landowners, the municipality owning the road and so on, as actually has become a super good case for the city and the landowners at the same time. And we do that actually one-to-one in another suburban area right now called Brøndby. And that is also looking into having the same benefits. So I would say the main challenge of creating a good city is really sometimes there's just not a good communication, then you don't get the big picture together. You need a shared vision. You also need a shared economy to invest in the public space. Otherwise, you don't achieve these well-connected districts, and you will never achieve these 5-minute city visions, I think, if you don't deal with those issues. But I have to say that some places, it's very hard to make people talk together, and especially within the existing city. It's easier with these brownfields because it's often 1 or 2 landowners involved. If that answers.
Thank you very much for your bold vision on how to transform in ecological terms the city and the region of Copenhagen. I was wondering with the case of Nordhavn, and it's also related to one project that it's not yours, but the Lynetteholmen promotion that will be on the eastern side of the canal, let's say, that both projects have been a bit criticized in terms that there's been an idea of greenwashing in terms of letting the cycling infrastructure promote a connection while permitting inner cars and not car-centric designs, but allowing cars to enter to central districts such as these mobility hubs. So what would be your consideration or just how to answer these criticisms so that that there is some kind of compatibility between these kind of interchanges, or should it be more radically transformative in terms of not allowing the car entrance to this kind of close to the center districts?
Very, very good question. There is a lot of discussions right now because we face, looking back, we did a urban LCA of the first phase. And just honestly learning, this is a massive CO2 number we have here. It's also coming from the infrastructure of the project. There was a whole new, it was all dug up and it was made again. So the infrastructural project of the first phase is as heavy on CO2 as the built environment. So I think we didn't have LCA projects back in 2010 and so on. So I think this first phase is going to be a major learning, looking into building and developing a more ecological aware district. And that is the big talk of the town. We are looking into new projects today. The railway district will also look into that. But I think the way we've built cities in centuries are just so heavy on CO2 emissions. So I think that's sort of a tradition from the guys doing the infrastructure, the guys doing the plumbing, doing the cables, doing the piping. All of this sort of has to be turned around into different ways of doing it. But it's also the people, the investors coming to build. They all build the same way. They build concrete blocks everywhere. And that sort of new laws coming to reduce CO2 emissions within the building and environment has gone like really the past 5 years. But that was not part of the first local plans here. So it was not, there was no initiator to actually reduce the impact on CO2. So the critics are completely right in many ways. I don't think it's greenwashing because I think so much has been invested in creating this super green mobility. I don't think you can build new cities without also serving cars. I don't think anybody will move there, to be honest. You would not have, at least then you would have maybe student districts or something. You can do that maybe. But once you want a mixed city with people from all ages, you're going to have cars everywhere. I think there's, at the North Harbor, there's planned for half a parking lot per housing unit. I mean, that's a very low norm compared to many other districts we work with in Germany. A lot of the plans we've done at minimum at 1 parking lot per household. And so I think there's a lot of tools here promoted on doing new things, but they're 15 years old now. So we also need a lot of stuff happened over just the past 2 years, the past 5 years. So I think it's a constant learning. But if you look at the first development, Ørsted in Copenhagen, and you take the southern harbor of Copenhagen, and you compare it to Nordhavn and the Carlsberg district, I mean, it's a world of a difference in how you achieve urban planning. So I think we've come far, but now we need to really reduce this footprint of urban planning, and it's super difficult. Honestly, I don't know how to do it, like to get to those numbers they want to achieve. If you talk to the activists, and I think there's a lot of, I also think there's a lot of shouting at actually a landowner that actually tries really hard. So I don't know. It's a balance, but I think sometimes I totally respect the green activism on actually shouting out and saying we need to change the way we live and all these things. But actually talking about lifestyle, the lifestyle we planned for at North Harbour is a complete game changer in many ways compared to other districts. So, and it's framing actually a nice urban environment from day one, which people like to come and visit. So if we talk about livability, I think it's A+. If we talk about LCA calculations, it's D- or whatever, character you give it. And that's what we need to level in the future. But it's super difficult. I'm sure any investor in Milan would say the same. So yeah, but let's do it. I mean, we have to do it. We have to stop building new cities, I believe. That's point one. Though I still believe we should keep on transforming all these brownfields, clean up all the mess we've done over the past 100 years, especially, and actually reframe those areas to become integrated with the existing urban environments. Because then we can frame all the housing we need, I think. And the Lynetteholm discussion, that's a whole chapter. That is just not the right way to do that, you could say. But it's gonna solve the climate challenge in a long perspective for Copenhagen. But the size of it is crazy. It's the size of Nordhavn, and it's a new Nordhavn, So that can be debated very well. Yeah, it's not pretty on our CO2 numbers. That's for sure.
Thanks. I don't know.
I was, a little provocation in the end.
Good.
So we have a discussions. It's not a clear question, but I think you were speaking about public space, basically, and there's an underlying quality of space, that is supposed to be shared. Like it's continuous, no break, no wall, no stop, no waiting, supposed to be. That real life is quite different, for whoever takes a bus or metro, we stop. And there's this idea of playfulness that you come back on it, which is kind of a concept as well of a certain idea. But we know that public space also democracy, therefore disagreement, march, riots, violence. In Paris, we love it. We go outside.
Famous for it.
We love to complain, and the spaces they're not shaped around it, but we know from Republic to Bastille, it's always where people are going to break everything, sort of. And so my question was like, how can you take that into account? Because you're saying, well, we made some mistakes before. And for me, the mistakes was always to think that people will be happy with what we provide them. They'll be happy to move, take the car, go straight, go fast. And then we realize, well, no, they're not so happy. In this environment, we missed playfulness, for instance. We missed connection between unifunctional districts. We missed a number of things that, So we are today probably doing the mistakes. We are doing them.
We're repairing.
Next generation will go like, what a bunch of prank. It's so stupid. How could they forget this essential aspect of life? We're doing mistakes, but we don't know exactly which one we're doing. So I think there's a kind of negativity in everything that we're doing. We're doing positive things. So of course you're pushing on the positive, because we are the forces, because they are the driving forces. You're almost doing politics and you're playing on the really wide level. But if we are if we are frank, if we, I mean, you can share that, would you be able to imagine public space with this part of negativity or this part of things that we haven't planned? Or, I mean, do you have doubts? Do you have doubts sometimes?
Always.
Yeah, I think so, because I mean, with a distance of, 20 years, and you say we are improving, you're looking back
Mhm.
and you say, oh, that maybe we are adjusting still. And I think that's kind of, well, it's interesting to hear that we are trying to do it differently from when, our ideals are evolving as well. So my question is about so-called negativity, or things we don't plan, mistakes we do, or evolution in our positions regarding, what's supposed to be.
But I think the main evolution is what we also just talked about, is this, how to sort of frame an sort of ecology within our urban planning. Because I think there's a complete, I mean, the main dilemma is there's a complete contradiction between livability and ecology in many ways. Not around creating nice green spaces and great playful environments. We can do that. But the cost of it on the ecological offset is insane. Because like we walked around the Fondazione Prada yesterday and talked about what a beautiful masterpiece of architecture. But when you look at the resource consumption within that project, I mean, all the doors are double as fat as they have to be. That sort of design tradition that also OMA is very aware of today, I'm sure, is just so heavy. We are so good at designing things that are beautiful and livable and all these things, but they have an impact that is larger than what we can carry on a one planet system here. And I think that's the main contradiction today, because I think we're super good at creating livable districts and areas in many areas around the world. But that sort of conflict is just not solved. And I don't think anybody really knows how to solve it, because it's just very resource demanding to be an architect and an urban designer, even a landscape designer.
So you mean it, or our own conception of ecology, that it's problem?
I think so.
That's the things.
Yeah, I think so. I think, but I don't know, at least my idea of ecology can go in many directions. So if you only plan for plants and species, like our very idealistic vision of Greater Copenhagen could be, I mean, so where do I park my car maybe in 10 years, right? Or can I even drive to, no, you can only bike. Also, that will not work, I mean, why is Copenhagen thriving so well? It's because we have massive infrastructure. We have a super good road system, making it easy to go from your summer house cottage to living inside Copenhagen. It's super efficient planned. You can also, and the train network also works, but it's not being used the way it should be used. I mean, it could be tons of more people taking the S-train network every day. But because it's a bit inefficient and you have to change 1 or 2 times, you need to find a shared bike on the other end, all of these transportation mobility logics that we keep on talking about, they still take time. They take extra time. Most people living in suburbia, they prioritize, take their car, whatever. I even pay for the insane parking fee inside Copenhagen, People just think like that because it's easier and it's convenient. We love our cars. And I think that's just a major, major problem. It's convenience, a lot of it. Our convenience culture is so expensive on resources. So I don't know how you can, like Bruno Latour, he does some really nice, we have a professor at the Aarhus School of Architecture, Tom Nielsen. He writes some super interesting texts on the new ecology. I just think it's not practical yet. It's thinking, it's philosophy, but it's not been put into practice. I know there's a lot of experiments on building super low footprint, also architecture and so on, but it's at a very small scale. It's like one-story houses and so on. So you cannot keep on urbanizing the way we do and still reduce the footprint. We need to completely rethink that whole thing, and that's just not happening yet.
It's interesting to raise Latour. He's a fierce opponent of sustainability.
Yeah.
He is that, no?
Yeah.
He's a Catholic.
But he totally...
Sustainability is Protestant, has been always going against, because he said it's continuing this opposition between nature and cultures. Like, if we want to get over, forget sustainability and development. So I think he's too radical to be applied, but no, but
he is.
I think we still don't really know how to apply it, but it's also an option that may come one day. I mean, I would say as a view of ecology, but we don't really know. Maybe in the future.
Maybe you guys can solve.
Maybe you would know.
I would like to add something. First of all, thanks. It was really inspiring. And somehow, as landscape architect, according to me, there is a big discussion, which is not just philosophy and theory, that we should open about the two concepts of ecology and livability. Because I had also the feeling that in a way it is all too clean, and in a way it is a little, also the idea of livability is a little bit monolithic, and the unexpected, it is a little pushed aside. Yeah. And I was very impressed by the fact that you have described the moving from the first definition of an idea and then the process bringing you to define the scenario, and then in the processes this passage is very important, because in between there is a question of feasibility and the possibility of managing. But it's true what he was saying, that the question of the dark side of the public space, I was feeling sometimes I would like to do something breaking, or what it is so organized and clean. Maybe it is a Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Mediterranean.
It's too neat. It's too over-designed.
It is a little bit according to me. So my question is,
totally
within the process, of course, you start to define this big question. We cannot go on working like before. So we define a new ideal dimension that it's not yet a scenario, because it doesn't meet yet the question of feasibility and manageability. I don't know if it is working. Then you go to the realization. What do you experience within the process? I imagine it's something like a nightmare, because at the end, the investors force you to greenwash. Yeah.
Yes. Governance.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm sort of responding to the both of you too. It made me think that I was wondering during your talk if you didn't mention the questions of governance of public space, because you're raising that problem, because you worked on the street. Probably you had plenty of ideas about the street and plenty of concept about how to define public space, and I'm sure we're just having a very slight view of everything, but there's big questions of how to politically manage people who live there, people who go through, some who vote, and those who go through don't vote. So they use it, but you can't say anything. And then you're here in between as urban planner, having to deal with all these actors. So I think your question made me think of questions of governance, which I don't know much about. but
it's also a social question, right? I mean, how is there room for everybody?
As an actor,
nature, yeah.
As Latour would say, whatever thing, object is an act, is a social actor as well, like an animal.
But I agree to some extent also that our projects are very neatly curated. also because they're brand new, you know, like a new iPhone. It looks very shiny. No, I think a little bit the same, and I'm looking forward to take some pictures in 10 years but I should bring some honest pictures from Nørreport because that's pretty worn down. So I think, and actually that's why I bring this sort of social slide, because it is really a space that's been worn in. I think being in a city that's rather new compared to being in Milan, going to, like, if you talk Italy, Rome, or I mean, you have all these historical palaces and beautiful, beautiful, beautiful spaces that's been worn in for centuries. You know, we have very few of those in Copenhagen because we are actually a very small country that now became actually finally have a big city. So I think also that's sort of talking about time and layers of the city. We don't have that authenticity in a lot of our spaces yet. We are, though, trying to take care of all these layers of this like industrial culture and so on, and use that. I just think that we have a tendency in Denmark also to over curate maybe, and we have a very, very big design culture. We're also quite a wealthy society, so there's a lot of money being put into this, and then sometimes it ends up being almost too like nice, right? But there's a lot of focus on creating spatial spaces for social cohesion. There's a huge affordable housing program in Copenhagen and Denmark that it's 22% of housing in Copenhagen municipality is social housing, affordable housing. So there's, I think, a lot of discussions around these things, but the urban space compared to being here in Milan is a completely different world, I think, in many ways. Yeah, we should let more like rough nature just get in there. But you should visit my neighborhood, one of the old boroughs. It's full of roughness, and it's a complete different story. Maybe I should bring that next time I go out, just to bring the contrast. Dirty. The dirty. We have very dirty streets. It's not all looking like Nordhavn at all.
But you have one of the criticalities in our areas in France in the last years is the elderly people, for example. So Copenhagen is a really young city for students and so on. Yeah. We have a really different composition in the population. Yeah. So also the topic of the bike, for example, bike lane, and of the student housing and so on is connected to the population.
True.
Always and always.
There's no plus 70, few plus 70 taking the bike on the green loop. Yeah.
It's another big differences and
completely different. Yeah. Most the average age in Copenhagen is 37 right now. Insanely young population. 37. Yeah. So a lot of elderly people have been pushed to the suburbs, seriously. But if you look into the demography of Greater Copenhagen, it's a complete different age level. But in the municipality, the driver is super young right now. And there's also a lot of young professionals coming to work for Novo Nordisk or some of these big companies that are really right now not doing so well. But but that has changed over the past 20 years completely. That's true. And that is a different agenda when we work in Høje-Taastrup, for instance, around these things. But you know what the mayor he wants? He wants the young families. That's the program we get. Design something for the young families to come. We do a beautiful skate playground for you, and so it's also politics. And if we want to win the competition, we need to get the politics right, because otherwise we'll be the big loser quite quickly. So there's a huge fight for the resources in the region, people resources.
Too close to so.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a really
complete different situation.
Completely different.
Yeah. That's another very different dynamic. That's true. It's how is Milan actually growing as a city, or in population, or is it?
No, it's a little bit growing
Okay.
population, but just in these final years, and thanks
Okay.
to the metropolitan areas, because it's small urban areas with a population quite similar, although in many decades. But the area, the metropolitan areas, is improving the population, but is really thanks to the migrations and the movement, movement in the world. So is attractive Milan for immigrants and other. So it's not. Is a really
it's not the best situation
transition in ethnographic composition of the
yeah. It's some totally different strategies than I'm talking about here. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we need to wrap up, unless we want to skip lunch after. So thank you again, Mats, for the lecture. It's been great.
Cool.
So now we split into the two sessions. So we're gonna have unfolding new mobility with Giulia Setti in this room, while with Andrea Oldani, landscapes of reinvention to the craft. So you're also gonna see the other spaces of the department. And you're going to go with Raffaella Cavallaro, and of course, and Professor Oldani. So thank you very much again.